You see the green and yellow branding if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're listening, this is news to you. Today is a crossover episode. We're going to get you set for the Orlando Magic's Mexico City game against the Atlanta Hawks with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks. Get to learn about the Magic's inverse team, so to speak. So bienvenidos, Locked On Magic. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is November 8th, or will be November 8th, because I'm probably publishing this early, 2023. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You, of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to chat with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks, get the skinny on one of the Orlando Magic's division rivals, the first Eastern Conference team the Magic will face this season. And more about this upcoming game in Mexico City for the Orlando Magic. We'll talk about what has made the Hawks successful this year, what has made the Magic successful this year, and how these two teams match up. It is a great conversation, so stay tuned for it. Before we do any of that, though, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Before we get to Brad, just a couple of quick things that I want to talk about. The Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks traveled to Mexico City on Tuesday. No practice on Tuesday. Magic just traveled, get acclimated. They'll have, I believe they're scheduled to practice on Wednesday, as well as do NBA Cares events. So a lot to get to before we get to Thursday's game. This is a pretty unique opportunity, although Orlando has been to Mexico City plenty of times, including playing a pair of home games against the Chicago Bulls and Utah Jazz back in the 2019 season. I believe it was December 2018. But the Magic, no one on that Magic team, only Jonathan Isaac's on that. Jonathan Isaac was on that team, so it's not like the Magic have some advantage. Obviously, we're still kind of reeling a little bit from Monday's loss, and I just want to give a couple quick notes from that game, just now that we've had the chance to decompress and think a little bit about the game itself. Looking back at the numbers, the Orlando Magic did a good job getting open threes. They were 1 for 16 for threes in the second half. According to NBA.com's shot tracking data, the Magic took all 16 threes with the closest defender 4 or more feet away. 10 of those 16 threes were wide open. The Magic were 1 for 6 with the closest defender 4 to 6 feet away. The Magic were 0 for 10 in the second half with the closest defender 6 or more feet away. This is to say that, yes, the Magic let go of the rope defensively. Yes, the Magic still had their chance to win late in the game, trailing by 2 with 5.5 minutes to play, before they gave up a 9-0 run that put the game out of reach, and frustration for everybody took over. That is the stuff they have to improve on: the poise, the composure, the maturity to close out games. The shooting, though, is going to come. This is not going to be a great shooting team. They're going to miss shots. But the Magic's ability to get good looks is a positive thing. And that is just, frankly, something that is probably an outlier for this team and for this game. So as the Magic get ready to face a very high-powered offense in the Atlanta Hawks, they are going to have, as they get ready to face a very high-powered offense in the Atlanta Hawks, they have to continue to have faith in their shots. They will get the free throws. They will get the offensive rebounds. These are the key ingredients to the Magic's success. They can win the paint. And if they do that, they will have a chance to win more games than not. And at this point, that's all this team is looking for. Orlando failed to kind of keep their cool, keep their composure, keep their defense as they were missing these really easy looks. And I think that lack of confidence did cascade a little bit. But now the Magic have a chance for a new game and a new opponent. And the Atlanta Hawks are going to be a fun team to face. These are two teams that should be in competition for a spot in the play-in tournament, if not something more. A very big game, a very big kind of standalone game in Mexico City. So without further ado, Let's chat with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks to get the lowdown on the Atlanta Hawks. And we are now joined by our friend from Locked On Hawks, Brad Rowland. Brad, hola, ¿cómo está? I don't know if that's okay to do. Am I cool to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna pass on speaking Spanish, which I have not done since like 6th or 7th grade. But yes, happy to be here. Happy to talk to you. And a standalone game between 2 Southeast Division teams that's happening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. Because of course,
yeah, because of Central Time Zone and all that, and happening in Mexico City in the middle of a 4-game Magic homestand. You know, it's the NBA, and I think this is the Magic's fault. So I will take the blame for this happening, or my franchise, the franchise I am ostensibly representing. We will take the blame. The Magic like to get out around the world. I think Visit Orlando is the title sponsor of this Magic focused international series, which included the Flamengo game in the preseason. But so apologies. Sorry. Hope everyone enjoys Mexico City. As I told everyone before they left at the game Monday night, please don't get sick this time. Nobody gets sick on these international trips. That seems to be the annual thing when the Magic go overseas. But Brad, we actually have, I think, a really, really interesting game and a really, really interesting matchup developing between the Orlando Magic and the Miami Heat, or not between the Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks. I want to get to taking down the Miami Heat, which is the ultimate goal of all of society, is to destroy the Heat and topple the statue of Pat Riley. But let's start here. You know, it's obviously too early to say anything is real or 100% real, but how would you describe the Hawks season so far?
Yeah, I think it's gone fairly well. You know, if you had caught me,
I'd say
probably similarly to how you're probably feeling right now. If you had caught me before the game on Monday, it would have been even better. The Hawks lost Monday, as did the Magic. But yeah, I think that it's gone fairly well. Certainly, the vibes are very good in comparison to probably the previous 2 years for the Hawks. New coach, even though he came in last year, it's the kind of still the full clean slate, full new staff. No big injuries, knock on wood, at this point in time, that kind of stuff. Like it's all going well. They're not playing perfectly, as you might expect this early in the season. There's still stuff to figure out. Rotations are different, all that stuff. But I think that the proof of concept has kind of been lingering. You've kind of seen what they're preaching. They're buying in, which I think is very important for a team that had some high highs in the previous regime. But now I think Quinn Snyder is a different guy and a different coach and a different mindset. And everyone seems to be on the same page. Of course, they're 4-3. They're not 7-0. Like they're not necessarily in the mix for the #1 seed, I wouldn't think, this year, but they're certainly playing better. And I think more like they want to be playing in the future.
Yeah. And obviously this is a team that has been to the playoffs the postseason year after year. Maybe not where they want to go. You know, obviously 2020 reaching the conference finals is a huge step and one that's kind of the high that they've been chasing over the last few years, 2021, excuse me, when they reached the conference finals, is certainly kind of the high that they're chasing. What impact has Quinn Snyder had on this team? Because yeah, they brought him in at the All-Star break. They kind of got this ball rolling and kind of figured out who they are late in that season to get into the play-in tournament. And everyone might forget this. They beat Miami on the road, yep, to get the 7 seed. Like this is a battle-tested team.
Yeah, and you know, Quinn, I think to his credit, was very complimentary of the previous staff, which he just inherited. Like he came by himself at the beginning, was with the previous staff, which is very, very strange. Like it was I'll say the long spiel. That was a very bizarre situation. A high-profile guy getting hired mid-season on a team that was still trying to win has basically never happened that late in the year. It was like unprecedented.
George Karl with the Kings, maybe. But
even that was earlier. There were similar ones, but as far as I could tell, going back a long way, it was the latest a guy of his stature had come in a season for a team that was still trying. So it was like very interesting. Anyway, he did admit though over the summer and particularly in advance of training camp that he couldn't put his stuff in last year. They were kind of just trying to keep the train on the tracks, little tweaks here and there, and then he finally had this opportunity this summer and then this fall to kind of put his system in. And what I would describe it as sort of in its shorthand is it's much more modern. The Hawks are taking more threes and they're getting to the rim more. It's less mid-rangers. That's kind of the easy shot profile stuff. They're also just playing faster. This is a team that has, you know, lightning fast pace so far, especially in transition frequency. Like they're up near the top of the league. In fact, they are #1, I believe, right now in how fast they are playing. And like, it's basically Quinn ball is the way that I would say. More ball movement, more player movement, less stagnation. The previous regime, Nate McMillan, kind of believed in mismatch hunting was a very old school approach. And I don't say that necessarily in a negative way. It did work. As you mentioned a couple of years ago, it worked very well. But it's a whole new system. And they kind of got a lot of side eyes from people when they didn't really change a lot this summer. And look, I get why. When you're not great, your first round exit, and then all you do is kind of make your team worse on paper by trading John Collins for basically nothing. People are like, what are they doing? And it's like, well, they're just trying to see what Quinn's going to do. Like, Quinn was their big offseason acquisition, and they're playing that way. Like, they're obviously Jalen Johnson's breakout. It's also something we talk about if you want to, but I think that's really what it came down to, is that they believed more in what this group could do talent-wise than they had played at the previous 2 years. And I think we've already seen a little bit of that so far. But like, the formula on this team is a top 5 offense. That's what they were 2 years ago, even when they weren't that good. And like an okay defense. This is an offense first team. And I think we kind of already started to see, like, they're already a top 5-6 offense right now, despite not shooting the ball that well, which is a positive.
Yeah. And like, that's the formula. Like, I think I've talked about this on my show. Like, Steve Clifford, when he was here in Orlando, used to always say, your goal as any team, if you're just trying to make the playoffs and figure out how to grow, if you're top 10 in offense or defense and top half of the league in the other, you should be in the playoffs. And that's obviously a simplistic goal and a simplistic way of looking at things. If you're top 10 in both, you're a pretty good team. You're probably going to be advancing pretty far. So, at a certain extent, especially as you're trying to come together and trying to figure out your identity, and let's be real, rebuilds of any type. And I don't think the Hawks are rebuilding, so to speak. They're kind of reloading. It's a multi-year project. It very rarely happens like instantaneously. Like, you have to like kind of figure some things out. And, we'll talk about the Magic. The Magic are kind of loading up, especially on defense, and they'll figure out the offense later. It feels like Atlanta, and this is probably how it's felt the last few years, I think, with Atlanta. They're loading up on that offense, and obviously they should. Trae Young is their best player and is not viewed as a great defender. They added DeJounte Murray, who is also a fantastic offensive player. That is who they are. And it's a lesson in really maximizing that. You mentioned the Jalen Johnson thing, because I at least when I was going through my predictions and my thoughts on this team, like I thought Quinn Snyder was going to make the team better. He's too good of a coach not to make this team better. But I kind of had them just like treading water, because I felt losing John Collins was a big deal and was, a curious thing, especially not getting anything of value in return. That's a big gap to lose. How have the Hawks kind of filled that role, filled that gap, or how has that changed how they attack offensively, probably for the better at this point?
Yeah, and I'll say, like, I am kind of known, especially locally, as a pretty big John Collins guy. I think he's a good player. I think that's a notable loss. But sneakily, they acquired Sadiq Bey last year at the deadline for...
Don't need to tell us about him.
Yeah, for just draft capital. And that kind of allowed them some flexibility, because now they have this guy who they could reasonably start at the 4 if they needed to, and he has a little bit this year. And then they had this more high upside guy with Jalen Johnson, who hadn't played a lot, but a guy they liked in the draft and was a former 5-star prospect, all that stuff. But, Johnson... I think Hawks fans, as you might imagine, are getting maybe a little bit carried away with Jalen Johnson right now. I mean, just a small amount, because like you're getting comparisons to like stars, like established star players. It's okay. Let's just take a breath. But he's playing great. That was a great pick. I loved it at the time. And what he really unlocks with them is that for the longest time, the Hawks have been playing this front court of DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, Clint Capella. And those guys are all solid players in their own respects, but none of them are plus passers or ball handlers or facilitators. So they were kind of stagnant up front. It was a lot of Trae. It kind of had to be. But what Johnson brings them, he's not a great shooter, but he's got a lot of ball skills. Like I wouldn't call him a point forward, but he's certainly comfortable in the short roll. He can run. Actually, he could probably run a pick and roll as a ball handler if you wanted to. So it's just more dynamic, I would say. He's also really long athletic as well. So without going into the long spiel, like he just unlocks some stuff they didn't really have before, skill set wise. And then if they want to go a little bit more with shooting, they can go with Bey at the 4. They're just more versatile than they've been in previous years. Again, that's not a shot at Collins. Collins was probably miscast playing next to a true center that couldn't shoot like Capella anyway. So now they just have more versatility. And yeah, their depth took a hit with, losing John Collins for nothing is not great. But when you have a guy in Johnson that has super talent plus Bey as sort of a stopgap, like really quality rotation forward, it kind of gives you options.
Yeah, and I think, the kind of player that Jalen Johnson is, I'm sure the Magic looked at him. I don't remember exactly where he fell in that draft, but like, that's like the whole philosophy of what the Magic are doing is let's get some big ball handling, some ball handling forwards and have them be attackers and have everyone capable of even bringing the ball up the floor and initiating the offense. Before we kind of flip things over and move on to where the Magic are at, how, year 2 of the Trae DeJounte pairing, I think people expected it to kind of hit the ground running last year. Everything takes time, especially a partnership that's that different. Trae having to play a little bit more off the ball, perhaps because DeJounte can attack and take some of that burden off of him. DeJounte doing the same with Trae. How does that pairing look in year 2 compared to year 1?
It is looking better. I said this a lot over the summer. They weren't bad when they played together last year, but they weren't as good as that pairing needs to be. Like if your 2 best players are not winning their minutes by a lot, you're in trouble, basically, is what I would say when they're playing together. The worst part about that pairing actually last year was that the whole theory of the case, and was part of it, was that Murray was supposed to lift the second unit because they've had this long chronicled issue with playing without Trae. They've just always been awful with Trae off the floor, and that didn't actually help last year. Murray without Trae didn't work, but I think Snyder has been more creative and having them play off of each other. They're interacting more on the courts. It's a little bit less your turn, my turn, and it's not a perfect pairing. I think even they would probably admit that on Truth Serum. Like, these 2 guys are not like designed in a lab to play together, but I think that they've already started to kind of show the size of what they can be on offense. And then defensively, they're kind of small. Murray's not probably as good on defense as he used to be in San Antonio, pre-injury, all that stuff. But it's enough there with the way that Murray's playing defensively. And Murray's been playing really well early on. Actually, sneakily, Trae has not shot the ball well at all to this point. But to have these results with Trae not doing that, and kind of the proof the concept is there. I think they're just starting to trust each other more. Not necessarily like, that sounds negative. I don't mean it to be negative. They were already kind of bought into each other, but they're playing off of each other. It's not just stand like one guy over here, and line up and kind of play iso ball or pick and roll. They're actually running actions with them both. Trae's moving more off the ball, and I think it's starting to look better than it ever has.
Yeah, and that, that's one thing that we could say about Snyder. Snyder is really creative offensively. That is, not that Nate McMillan was a poor coach. I'm a big believer, and this is coming from a guy who had Steve Clifford as the head coach for 3 years.
Yep.
Coaches are like players. They kind of have ceilings. They have roles in the development process. Like Steve Clifford and Nate McMillan are the same type of coach. They focus on the very, very basic things. You get very, very good at the basic things. That gets you into the playoffs, but does that help you get to the first round, to the second round, to the conference finals? Though, they've both of those guys have had long, successful careers of just getting to the playoffs, maybe sneaking McMillan more than Clifford, sneaking a playoff series here or there, but making more out of their talent to get to the playoffs, but not necessarily maximizing that talent. And, Quinn Snyder, obviously, with the Jazz, didn't quite get over the hump completely, but he turned those Utah Jazz teams into juggernauts that were Western Conference contenders. And obviously the playoffs are a different animal. And I definitely want to kind of circle back to that notion, because I think both the Magic and the Hawks, this game on Thursday is going to mean something come April. I think these are 2 teams that are going to be fighting for, I think, for a lot of the same things, maybe at different levels. Maybe the Hawks are, I would anticipate the Hawks are maybe a little bit ahead, just because they're veterans. They got guards who can actually shoot. And the Magic are still a young team kind of figuring things out. But it definitely feels like there's a higher ceiling for what Atlanta can become, especially as, kind of the next wave of the next move happens. And maybe Orlando and Atlanta are teams that are going to be involved in kind of the next big round of trade carousels. Let's take a quick break for our conversation with Brad Rowland to talk a little bit about our friends from PrizePicks. Look, a lot of these daily fantasy games are confusing. They're frankly meant to be confusing. Like, why is this player worth this much in the salary pool? What are points? I don't know what points are. I follow the Magic. We haven't scored points in a decade. That's why it's confusing. So take out the confusion and play a fantasy game that you can actually win. PrizePicks is the most fun you will have, winning up to 25 times your money this basketball season. You can even combine entries with football too, so you can make your Sundays that much more fun. You can even, there's actually even little group special leagues that combine football and basketball stats to add even more excitement to your sports watching every day. PrizePicks gives you the best opportunity. All you have to do is pick more or less than the projected numbers, and you win if you get your picks right. That there's still that part of the game. Prize Picks is the best daily fantasy game that I have played. I play it regularly. I won't say I play it every day, but I play it regularly. And Prize Picks gives you such a great chance to win. I win regularly. That's the best part. Those other daily fantasy games, you don't win regularly. You're just hoping to make your money back. With Prize Picks, you actually have the chance to win and win big. It doesn't take very much to put together an entry of your picks of more or less than the projected numbers. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. I'll start here then with Orlando.
Yeah.
The way I, asking my own question to myself, the way I would describe Orlando's season so far is promising and showing, more maturity. The Magic are still, I think, the 4th or 5th, maybe 6th youngest roster in the league. So they're very, very young. They're prone to still making mistakes. I think we saw frustration get the better of them Monday against Dallas. They didn't quite know how to respond to a run or not getting calls or, shots not falling. And it turns out pretty good looks ended up not falling in that game. But there's definitely a more mature and more serious approach to the way this team is going about things. And you can see that especially on the defensive end where Atlanta has, got all these offensive weapons and have become, one of the elite offensive teams in the league, even after the loss to OKC on Monday. Orlando has really built itself into a defensive juggernaut. I don't know what the stats were Monday. I haven't looked them up, but at least entering Monday's game, they led the league in deflections. Their whole deal is they're just going to be really, really hard to play. They're going to be really, really pesky, and they're going to find a way to turn that into offense for them. They've got Paolo Banchero now playing at a higher level than he was earlier in the season, at least scoring wise. They're trying to be very selfless and almost too selfless at times, trying to keep everyone involved and get the best shot. And they're a group that just knows how to play together and trusts each other pretty well. Now, the offense hits some hiccups, and that's when the Magic run into some trouble. But this is a team that they at least believe can keep themselves in games based off their defense and especially their defensive length and depth of length.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because they're right now on paper anyway, they're kind of inverse teams. Orlando has the top 5 defense. And
if we combine these two teams, like Trey, DeJounte, Paolo, Franz, and Wendell or Capella or Wendell or Kongwu at center, and Wendell's hurt right now, so probably not him at this point. that is a championship level team right there. Yeah,
I mean it's intriguing to me because I won't act like I've seen every moment of the Magic this year. That's not the beat that I'm on. But yeah, I mean, look, I've always thought this from the outside that the defensive personnel has the chance to be quite good. I mean, I think they were 10th or 11th last year after the All-Star break on defense. They were showing signs. Their guards in particular, it's again the inverse of the Hawks, where the Hawks perimeter defense has been pretty poor for talent reasons a lot of the time. Whereas Orlando's guards, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, they have some really high quality defensive guards on this roster talent wise. And then the sheer size and bulk of Paolo, you got Franz, who I'm a Michigan guy. I've always loved Franz. He can obviously guard. And I love Wendell. He's a local Atlanta product. So all those things, I'm kind of bought into the defense. The question is the offense. And it's okay, how good can they be on offense? And again, it's not to make the comparison too many times, but it's the same question I have about the Hawks defense. It's okay, can they get to league average on offense would be the question for Orlando right now, today on their offense. And I guess that's the question that you have to answer. And obviously that's more big picture than when it comes to Thursday's game. But I was starting to make some notes about Thursday's game. And it's well, man, this is undeniably up and down. They're just kind of mirror images of each other in reverse. And the turnover creation, the Hawks have always been great at taking care of the ball. Orlando forces a ton of turnovers. It's kind of all there for you. Yeah.
And to that point, you mentioned, Atlanta's really good at getting out in transition this year. The Magic are, I think, tops in the league in stopping transition points this year, or they're top 5 in the league, at least in that. Orlando's got to attack the offensive glass. And, they were asking Jason Kidd about this on Monday. He said their ability to attack the glass is as much about their guards jumping in for rebounds. Jalen Suggs will jump in for a rebound. Anthony Black is he's a rookie, but he's an excellent rebounder. Cole Anthony is 6'2", maybe. He is an excellent rebounder for a guy his size, and everyone gets involved on the glass, but they're able to do that and still not give up transition points and transition opportunities, which is a pretty at least, on paper, a contradictory thing to happen. It's been, I was, this team defensively, that was kind of the hope that they gave last year. They went 29-28 after December 7th, which is when the season began last year. They were seventh in the league in defensive rating over the final 57 games. And that includes essentially 3 games where they tanked. So there is, 57 games is not nothing,
No.
at this point, like the Magic sitting, I know they were second in the league in defensive rating entering Monday's game. Monday was their worst defensive performance of the season. So they're probably like 3rd, 4th, or 5th at this point. It's too early in the season, to say that these numbers are real and that any number is real. Jamal Mosley even said he doesn't look at the numbers till like game 20, but you get 57 games. That's, almost 2/3 of the season. That tells you something's real. And it feels like the Magic really committed in training camp and with their personnel to be really strong defensively. Like they committed that, hey, we are going to be disruptive. They want Jalen Suggs, shooting the gap for steals, and they'll trust that they can fill in while he scrambles back because that dude is a maniac who's going to do whatever, going to be, Jalen Suggs is a chaos agent. You'll see him on Thursday. He is just going to get into everything like that. The dude is, I'm always worried he's going to get hurt because of the injury history with him, but also because he will throw his body anywhere he needs to throw it to get the basketball on defense. If he could hit a shot here or there, that would change a lot of things. And obviously, like, that's the big weakness, that the favorite stat, now that my Steve Francis stat is gone, my favorite, for Hawks fans listening, my Steve Francis stat was before Paolo Banchero last year, the Magic did not have a non-center average 20 points per game in a season since Steve Francis in 2005.
That is a fantastic stat. I have
yeah,
to
Dwight Howard and Nikola Vucevic both got there, but Jameer Nelson was 19.9 in 2009. Hedo Turkoglu was 19.9 in 2008. So there's a few close calls, but Paolo got to 19.5, 6 or 7, I think, last year to officially eclipse 20 points per game. So maybe that stat still is relevant. But the new favorite stat now that I feel confident their Magic are going to break this year, but it still looks shaky. Orlando's not had an offense outside the bottom 10 in the league since 2012, since Dwight Howard left. Yep. And that is the absolute biggest key to their success. Why did the Magic lose to Dallas on Monday night? They shot 1 for 16 on threes in the second half. They shot 7 for 11 in the first half, built a 15-point lead. We all kind of, I think I sat there in halftime. I was like, that's probably not going to last. So, Dallas came back on Charlotte the night before. This is what they do. They shoot 1 for 16, all 16 threes, at least according to NBA.com stats. The closest defender was no more than 4 feet away. 10 of them, the closest defender was no more than 6 feet away. At the end of the day, you got to make shots. And that is the challenge for this Orlando Magic team is, can they hit enough shots, especially to make defenses respect their shooters enough to give Paolo and Franz the room to get into the paint? Because a lot of the really good defensive teams, they got 5 guys with a foot in the paint, and they're just daring Paolo to try and make something happen. They can't call every foul.
Yeah, I was actually making notes about this matchup for a written thing I was doing, and I noticed that stat that you just gave about the offensive rating. It's, by the way, it also mirrors their effective field goal percentage, which is just the shooting. I mean, I was looking on cleaning the glass. I'm not sure how familiar everybody's with that, but if you're in the blue on cleaning the glass, that's not good. And there's a lot of blue in the shooting departments for Orlando for about a decade now. So it's not it's just, and look, personnel wise, you can see why. I mean, their guards are not great shooters for the most part. I mean, obviously they're trying to invest there a little bit more, but Paolo being their best player, not a great shooter at this point in time. Like, it's pretty obvious to see why that is, but it's a make or miss league in a lot of ways. Look, the Hawks are awesome on offense. They just had a night on Oklahoma City on Monday where they couldn't make a shot, and that's why they lost. I mean, it was literally, they dominated the game, possession battle, all that stuff. But in the end, that one shooting category is the biggest one. And if you don't make shots and your opponent does, you're not going to win very often. So
yeah, so as Atlanta not making shots, they still scored like what, 114?
Yeah, I mean, the baseline is a little bit higher for their offense, but again, this is and I think Orlando, you talked about it already, but they know, it seems like from what you just laid out, they know that they're a defense first team, and like everyone likes to say that they're a defense first team. I think every coach would like to say that, but deep down, teams know, like the Hawks know that they're an offense first team, and it's Orlando's the opposite. And that makes sense. Like, you got to know what your personnel is. And that path to Orlando being a good team this year is just like, be okay on offense, make some more shots, win on the margins, possession battle stuff. And this is a team that kind of has to win. It seems like from the outside. I'm a little stuck because they're not going to be a great shooting team. That's just not going to happen this year. So it's everything else, offensive rebounds, turnover avoidance, all that stuff that you have to win on.
Yep. And that, like I was talking to some people today about that from the Dallas game, fresh in our memories. So I apologize. Magic only had 6 offensive rebounds in that game. They scored 15 second chance points. There's a lot of team rebounds in there. So that explains some of the discrepancy between that. But, the Magic are a team that has to make up, their lack of 3-point shooting with getting to the foul line, getting second chance points, limiting points off turnovers, limiting fast break opportunities, running when they can. Those are where you're right. They got to win that battle. Let's take another quick break so we can tell you a little bit about our friends over at FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action than today. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I think if I've been looking at the site correctly, they even give you kind of an optional parlay list too. They cater picks to your very needs and to the very games that you are watching anyway. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. So let's turn to Thursday's game then. We're playing in Mexico City. Altitude is going to be a factor in this game, I think. What is the biggest key for you in this game?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the altitude because I thought about it, and then I hadn't thought about it a lot until the last day or so. And for those who don't know, Mexico City's altitude is higher than Denver. Like, it's higher than Denver. And granted, they gave both teams 2 days off, which is probably smart before this one.
Having said that, I know Orlando flew up there to Tuesday.
Yeah,
I'm sure Atlanta did too because they all got NBA Cares events on Wednesday.
Yes,
so
they're going to be busy.
Wednesday's a busy day.
Yeah, they'll be busy, but they're not going to be running necessarily. I mean, maybe they'll run a little bit, of course.
I think the Magic are scheduled to practice.
Yeah, and I think the Hawks will too. It's just that I'm not sure how it's going to play with the Hawks, honestly, because Atlanta, for the most part, is playing an 8-man rotation, which is kind of crazy for a team that has decent health right now. Like, they're playing 9 most nights, but it's like 8.5. Like, a guy's playing 5 minutes, and then the rest of the guys play 20 plus. So I don't know if that's going to lead to Snyder expanding the rotation or what. Maybe the guys just play a little bit less at the top end minutes. That's a big TBD on the elevation. But I have to ask you. I mean, without Wendell Carter, I know this is not the first time this has happened, unfortunately, for Orlando. That he's going to be out. I'm circling that because I was really already kind of flagging, especially the ball security as kind of maybe a pivot point because Orlando has been so good creating turnovers. The Hawks have been pretty good taking care of the ball, but not as good because they're playing faster. The Hawks are playing faster now than they ever have, and that's going to lead undoubtedly to more turnovers. It's a little bit less of just Trae Young playing slow and operating, which is usually probably a good thing, but it's going to be more turnovers. So for me, it's like the possession battle is the key. It's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's like, okay, can the Magic box out the Hawks, who've been great on the offensive glass this year, and can the Hawks protect the ball against Orlando and their defense? That's where the game swings for me.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think pace, even in terms of just the way pace is measured on all the stat sites, possessions per 48 minutes. Like, Atlanta's a team that wants to run. Orlando is, I think they're still, it might have changed a little bit. I think they're still in the bottom half of the league in pace. They've been, for the first few games, they've been bottom 5 in the league in pace. Like, they're trying to limit possessions a little bit or play, not necessarily slower. They still play fast. They still invite a little chaos, but their goal defensively is to make you eat up a lot of shot clock, disrupt you, and make you kind of have to grind your way through a game. And so they want these longer possessions. And, to your point about the altitude, you said Atlanta wants to run faster. And so this altitude may slow them down. I'm a little concerned with the altitude that Orlando, because they play at such kind of like a breakneck defensive pace almost, that they're flying around, they're trying to get contests, they're trying to get these deflections, that Orlando could tire themselves out a little bit defensively and maybe lose something on the backside backside a little bit. I mean, it's just this great unknown to how these two, pace affects everyone at all times. Orlando has been still running a 9-man rotation, even with all their injuries. Jonathan Isaac sat out Monday's game. Caleb Houston stepped into his minutes. Goga Batadze has been stepping into Wendell Carter's minutes. Anthony Black stepped into Gary Harris's minutes and Markelle Fultz's minutes at this point. It's hard to say how it's going to affect everyone, just because, it is this great unknown, and it's something I think both coaches are going to manage. I want to give Orlando a little bit of an edge on depth, but it's also a lot of it's unproven with Orlando. We don't know if Isaac's going to be ready to go. Isaac's is always just kind of day to day. I'm highly doubtful Gary Harris will play. He's got a strained right groin. He's relatively close to coming back. He's missed he got injured last Thursday. He's doing some stuff on the court, but I find like bringing a guy back from an injury in altitude like this is probably not the best idea. But the Magic still trust their depth, and they still trust, Anthony Black has stepped in and played fantastic. And so to me, I think this game's going to come down to who controls the tempo. Like, let's throw out the pace and the possessions for 48-minute numbers. That's not what coaches talk about when they talk about pace. It's who is controlling the tempo of the game. Like who is dictating how fast the teams play. Like, the Magic want to run too, but they want to run under their control. They don't want to be running because they're going back and forth or because they're trading shots. They want to be running because their defense is setting things up. Whereas Atlanta, I'm sure, wants to be running because they're getting the ball out and they're just going. And they, they're trying to catch the defense before they can get set. And that's kind of the tempo that's gonna control this game.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point in general, and it's one of those stylistic contrast things that we've already talked about. These are just two very different teams that are, in some ways similar, but most of the ways not so similar. And I think the Hawks do want to play fast. They want to take more threes, and I think both teams will be energized. They both lost. How much you want to put on that? I think it's probably overblown a little bit in the NBA, honestly, like how much teams are fired up to play once they lose or whatever. But I think that it's a big standalone spot. Both teams should be focused. Obviously, we don't know who's going to play and who's not going to play when we're recording right now. But the Hawks don't really have a lot of uncertainty injury-wise. They have two guys that are not going to play, Kobe Buffkin, Wes Matthews, and nobody else that I know of is battling anything. So it's like we kind of know who's going to be there. It's just whether the Hawks go deeper into their bench because they have to. Like, do you guys want to play 7 minutes in Mexico City? I don't know, especially trying to play fast. Like, I do anticipate kind of a battle for tempo, like you laid out. Especially early on, you'll probably see some guys grabbing their shorts more often than they usually do in the first quarter. That initial, you talked to NBA player, I'm sure you have too. When they go to Denver or Utah or any of those places that are a little bit higher, it's that first wave where you can't get your breath, and you can't replicate that unless you're playing in a game. So like, we'll see maybe a little bit shorter rotations too, as far as like guys not playing 12 minutes in a row. I know the Hawks have a couple guys that are used to playing 10, 11, 12 minutes in a row.
The Magic start their games with Paolo playing the first 9 minutes of the first quarter. Like I don't see that happening.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah. So anyway, I'm fascinated by it. I think it's going to be two teams that are, and look, the division thing, but they've seen each other 4 times a year for a long time. They're obviously familiar with one another, and extra emphasis. It's a standalone game. I mean, you and I don't get many of these. Look, how many flat out complete standalone games did the Magic and Hawks play every year? Not that many. So it should be fun.
I mean, we get 5 games on national television, including NBA TV. This is number 2 for us. This is number 2 for us. Just seeing if there's a third one in there, but number 2 for us. And it's a big deal to be on this stage, and to some extent, even though it's just NBA TV. When they said the Mexico City game was there, I was like, oh, ESPN's got to be there, or TNT's got to be there. Like, this is a big promotional thing.
It's a Thursday, and they are terrified of the NFL. I'll tell you that right now.
I mean, this week's NFL schedule is not good on national TV. So come watch the Magic and the Hawks.
I'm with you.
I want to end here because I know how I'm feeling as someone covering a team that is thinking about breaking into the postseason and is thinking about what it takes to get to the postseason. Is there any thought about how this game plays into the bigger picture of the season? Like, does being in play and chase or having just even that small ambition, it does make every game feel a little bit bigger because the margins aren't that big. I know it's still super, super early in the season, but it does feel like there's a little bit of weight in this game because Orlando, Atlanta, we were both in the same grouping for the Locked On Ultimate NBA preview,
Yeah.
which I was very happy to be in because I think I've been in the Tankers group for all but 2 years that we've done this, and this was year 2. Do you see these two teams as being neck and neck when we get to March and April?
I think they're in a relatively similar place. I do think the Hawks are maybe a half tier above the Magic right now, and that's just because they're just more proven.
Yeah,
well,
I agree.
I do think Orlando has real talent, and I think they're also younger. They're in a different stage than the Hawks. I know the Hawks have been a little bit middling the last 2 years, but this is still a team that has been in the playoffs several consecutive seasons. They have expectations from the top, and I know Orlando is facing more of that this year as they sort of take their next step in their rebuild, but I just covered a rebuild 4 or 5 years ago, and it was different. Like the first couple of years when you're getting out of it, it's that progression, whereas the Hawks have already kind of been not to the top, but they were in the conference finals. Like they're kind of there. Yeah. And I think the Hawks are with Snyder and with this core, I would have them a little bit ahead of Orlando. I know we have a mutual, let's just say, I'm not even sure how to describe it about the Miami Heat, but it is what it is.
We're going to topple the statue of Pat Riley. They had that insufferable court that looked great, except for those words on the court, and their record is exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, I actually flat out, and I mean this, I picked the Hawks to win the Southeast this year, and part of that was that I'm not a Miami guy in the regular season. I will acknowledge their playoff voodoo, like that. I trust Spo, I trust Jimmy, but in the regular season, sneakily last year, they just weren't that good. The Hawks they weren't that good last year either, but I trust Snyder. I think this is a Hawks team that's probably going to win somewhere in the mid 40s. I picked them in the mid to high 40s, and I'm not saying Orlando can't get there. I wouldn't pick them quite there.
I had Orlando. I think my official prediction was 40 and 42. I had them like 38 to 44 wins. Like they're going to go through growing pains. Like Monday's loss to Dallas was like major. This team is young. They didn't know, Luka and Kyrie just ate them up at the end of the game, and Paolo and Franz aren't that level of player yet. If this is a close game, Trae Young is that level of player. Like the Magic saw it last year in that second game in Atlanta when DeJounte Murray drew Orlando had that wild comeback to come back in the game. DeJounte Murray drew the foul on Paolo, and it was just like Paolo got rooked in a big moment, and Murray hit the free throws, and that was it. That was the game. That's kind of like that. Again, that's the level that these guys are at. DeJounte Murray and Trae Young know what they're doing. If it comes down to a late game situation, those guys are going to know what they're doing, and the Magic are better. I'm not going to say they're not. Yeah. They're still figuring it out. And this year, like to me, Atlanta's goal this year is to solidify a playoff spot, solidify the kind of correct me if I'm wrong, solidify the basics of what they're trying to build and figure out how they can build out. Orlando is at the point of we want to be playing competitive games and expose our players winning pressure for the first time. And there's going to be growing pains with all of that.
Yeah, I think that's very realistic and very level-headed. And it kind of, one game in the NBA, it's tough to, to have the same emphasis in one out of 82. But if you extract all of that, like to a one-game sample on a neutral court with no Wendell Carter, who's the best player who's not playing on these two teams, the Hawks are going to be favored in the game. I'd imagine, according to our friends at FanDuel, by the time tip-off happens, the Hawks will be favored. They should be. Can the Magic win? Of course they can. I mean, it's not like it's going to be this like 15-point spread. It's not going to be that.
Yeah.
But I think the Hawks are the better team. And on a neutral court with no Wendell, I would pick the Hawks to win. But I mean, it's going
to be a tight game. Like it's going to be a tight game. Again, I hate to say it for the Magic. It's whether they come down, whether they make shots. Like that's the
NBA for you, right there.
Their offensive rating away from the Amway Center is like 1-0. It's like 107, 108, something like that. And at least before the Dallas game, at least through the first half of the Dallas game, it's like 120 something in Orlando at the Amway Center. So, leaving the Amway Center is something this team's got to prove that a team like the Hawks leaving State Farm Arena, they know how to play on the road. The Magic are still kind of figuring that out.
Yeah, makes sense to me. It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. Yeah. Brad, and the best part is, Brad, we got at least 3 more of these games after Thursday, maybe a 4th in the in-season tournament. Who knows? But maybe more when we get into April. This is a fun little rivalry. We didn't even talk about Paolo and DeJounte burying the hatchet. And quietly burying the hatchet. Who knows if that beef is still there. But Brad, where for my listeners, where can everyone find you and get ready for this game on Thursday?
Yeah, I am at BT Rowland on whatever that platform is called, Twitter or X, whatever it is. Also hosting Locked On Hawks as you do in reverse. So yeah, follow me there. I write for Dime. I have a Patreon. All that you can find me on that. Twitter's the best place to find me. Still, I'm calling it Twitter. It is what it is.
I am too.
Subscribe to the podcast.
Take that, Elon Musk. No,
mine and yours both.
Yeah. Yeah. As well, you could find me on Twitter for those that want more Magic thoughts at @PhilipR_OMD. I write for Orlando Magic Daily, so you can check that out at orlandomagicdaily.com. I also have a Patreon page, which I'll pimp separately, but you can find the link in my bio. And of course, listen to Locked On Magic if you want to follow the Magic the rest of the season. Brad, it was great. It was great catching up with you. And as always, we'll see you in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Thank you, sir. Enjoy the game on Thursday.
I want to thank Brad for coming on the show. You got our info in the close there, so I appreciate him for coming on the show. Hopefully, we will be talking more. Maybe maybe a play-in game, maybe in-season tournament. I'm not joking about this stuff. I've been joking with Magic staffers about it a little bit, but who knows? You never know. We could be seeing the Hawks plenty of times, and obviously, we still get 3 more games against the Atlanta Hawks guaranteed. After this one on Thursday. Tip-off on Thursday is at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So just when you thought you were done with West Coast time, we are back on West Coast time in Mexico City. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. You can, of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of the single podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. You can follow me also on Twitter at Orlando Magic, at OMagic Daily. And get for the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out orlandomagicdaily.com. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub for more insights on the Orlando Magic, deeper stat dives, videos, plenty of fun stuff. We have a Discord page as well to try and initiate some conversations. Gives you full access to me to ask questions. And of course, we're still growing community there. So please feel free to make suggestions for the kind of content you would like to see on the Patreon page, and I will do my very best to give it to you because that is why it is there. Thank you all for the support. I truly, truly, truly appreciate it. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic. This has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.